8th of July, what a date to remember. It's one of those where were you moments. And to dissect what exactly happened between Brazil and Germany, I'm joined this evening by Simon Hopper. Good evening. From Easy Odds.
Indeed.
We might take a look at the odds a bit later of a certain game that's being played a little bit later, Argentina versus Holland. Good evening, Ben.
Good evening, sir.
And good evening to you, David, as well, David Gibbs. Or we call you Gibbo,
yeah,
for the sake of the show, shall we?
Yeah.
Please do.
It was one of those games yesterday, where were you moments, and where were you when all this unfolded?
Well, I happened to be in the pub with a lot of guys from the office, and everyone couldn't quite believe what was going on. And my boss backed both teams to score, so he was pretty relieved in the 91st minute when Oscar managed to pop up with the consolation. But everyone was just absolutely stunned, and there's so many Brazilian fans in all the pubs in London as well. I don't know what the reaction must have been like, but it was absolutely crazy.
I mean, it was absolutely amazing, Ben, wasn't it, to watch sort of 29 minutes unfold of catastrophic defending. I mean, where were you, and how was you feeling after half an hour?
Yeah, it was astonishing, wasn't it? I was at home with some mates, and it truly was sort of behind the sofa, can I come out now, at half time. You know, watching it through your fingers, it was both exhilarating and sort of emotionally devastating, especially not only had I tipped them, but...
I know, I always said, look, they're never going to win it.
I know, but it's Brazil and then the home nation.
You said they would be out by the group stage.
Yeah, well, no, I didn't say that. I didn't quite say that, but I did say I think the pressure would get to them, and it obviously did yesterday. And yourself, David?
I just watched at home, and it was almost embarrassing. He felt sorry for him, didn't he? I mean,
watching someone getting kicked when they were down.
I think it's 170 odd seconds between the space of 3 or 4 goals.
Yeah. In games.
So, in your opinion, who was missed the most? Was it Neymar or was it De Silva?
I think Thiago Silva was the bigger loss. I mean, we talked earlier before we came on the show, guys, about David Luiz, and he just looked completely lost, didn't he? If you look at his heat map for last night, he spent almost as much time in the opposition half as his own. He just kept trying to do everything himself. Hopeless long balls to Fred over the top. He kept coming up for corners and leaving him isolated on the counter-attack. I think with Thiago Silva, more of a proper defender, he can sort of be a bit more expressive without sort of being detrimental to the team. So I think Silva was more of a loss. He certainly would have kept the score down, although you have to say, even with Silva and Neymar, Brazil wouldn't have won last night for sure.
I think they mentioned it, that they said David Luiz had probably needed to be more of that calming influence, control at the back, with Dante coming in, again, who's a player who likes to bomb forward as well. He needed to be sensible, and I just don't think
it wasn't all Luiz's fault, though, was it? I mean, let's be honest, it was probably the worst World Cup performance in history. I mean, no Brazil player played well. I think the Brazilian press gave player ratings early this morning. Every player got a 0, which pretty much sums it up. I mean, it wasn't just Luiz, was it? It was Marcelo, Gustavo and Fernandinho.
I mean, Marcelo just thought he was a left winger, didn't he?
Yeah, he played. I mean, what's odd about Marcelo is, traditionally we're used to him bombing on forward. However, most of this tournament he's been relatively reserved, relatively mature and sensible. But for some reason, I don't know whether it's Scolari's fault. Most likely, he was bombing on a lot, and there was so much trouble coming from that right wing. At least 3 or 4 goals came from there, and Lahm had an absolute field day. Great decision to put him back at right back, but he had so much space to work with down that right.
And the way the game unfolded in the first 5 minutes, you never thought it would happen because Brazil were on the attack.
First 10 minutes.
And I think they had a cracking chance. I think maybe Hulk may have had a cracking chance. I mean, what would it do to the players? Because obviously we know many from the fact that they play in the UK. Obviously, Luiz has left Chelsea. Chelsea fans will be delighted about that.
I think PSG are looking for the receipt at the moment, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely.
Just going through the bins. Where is it? Mourinho's laughing.
But how will it affect these players long term? Because this is a devastating defeat. I mean, you've got to go. 28, 29 years since they've even lost a home game.
There are players that won't play for Brazil again, I'm sure. I mean, particularly Fred. I mean, he got most of the abuse from the Brazilian public.
Fred's going to be the scapegoat. He hasn't performed, but. Yes, some players won't play for Brazil again, some will. So I think Bernard is a great player at Shakhtar Donetsk. He's definitely got talent. I think Scolari threw him as a bit of a wild card, and unfortunately it backfired. So I think that's the case, but yeah, some of them won't be.
Yeah, especially some of the older players. I think it's actually a blessing that Neymar wasn't involved, that somehow he wasn't scarred. And also Silva as well, both talismanic players, and I think it's actually beneficial for Brazil's future that they're not scarred by this humiliation. Somehow they can be the freedom fighters for the future. But Brazil, quite possibly now's the time to sort of take a step back and be a bit mature, honest and patient, and put their hands up and say, we don't have a divine right to win every World Cup. We actually need to have a look.
But I know this was a World Cup, and I take the point the pressure would have been on, but they dealt with the pressure in the Confederations Cup by beating Spain.
It's a different kettle of fish. I mean, Confederations Cup.
But they had the nation behind them.
I think it's a different kettle of fish. I mean, you're looking at Confederation Cup, which is a warm up to a World Cup. I wouldn't call it a Mickey Mouse trophy, but it's in a year where players are thinking, well, you know what, I'll sort of concentrate for next year, save myself, get ready for it. With a World Cup, the pressure is there. 32 teams compared to 8 teams.
Yeah.
So
I guess at that point we should have some balance, and it's not going to be any consolation to Brazil fans. But this was a semi-final, so it wasn't as if they dropped out of the group stages, and they did actually show some composure under a lot of pressure. But generally speaking, they just rode a wave of emotion and fan support. But as soon as they doubted that, just for a second, after that second goal, it just went so flat. And that was the most disappointing thing. They lost their heads and they just submitted.
I think Scolari said they sort of blacked out, didn't they? Blacked out for a period of 10 minutes.
But he's built such a functional team. If they didn't win the World Cup, he was always going to be under pressure, wasn't he? He was brought in to win the World Cup, and he knew the style of football wasn't very good. The only way he could get away with it is by winning the World Cup.
Should David Luiz have been sent off? I mean, he showed his elbow a couple of times in that first half.
It would have done Brazil a favour, wouldn't it?
Frustration.
It could have been less goals then.
Yeah, quite possibly should have been sent off, and like I said, it might have actually happened.
I mean, you look at the strength and depth of the Brazilian team. It's not as much as you compare it to sort of previous years. When 2002 there was Rivaldo, Ronaldinho. I say the larger Ronaldo on side. They had quality players and they had more depth in the squad. This year, I don't think they've got. I mean, bringing on Willian to play. Really, he's good at Chelsea. Don't get me wrong, but I don't think he's proved it in a Brazilian shirt.
Not quite established.
If you played in that team yesterday, you wouldn't necessarily be looking forward to the 3rd and 4th place playoff at the weekend. I mean, how do you think they're going to approach that? Do you think they'll just change the team completely? We'll discuss the Holland game.
He's got to find.
Soon,
he's got to find.
If they play
11
Argentina,
players.
for example, there could be further humiliation there.
He's got to find 11 players who actually want to play. I mean, I think he said after the dressing room was just distraught. It was a different place.
I wonder whether the compassionate side of Scolari, which we generally do see, and he's a bit like a father figure, I wonder if his dream is that Argentina lose against Holland, and then all of a sudden it's not just a 3rd place game. This is Argentina and Brazil. Yeah. I don't care if it's a friendly competitive match. This is enormous, and I just wonder whether he plays those exact same starting 11 and say, look, this is going to hang over you for the rest of your life, come what may, but this might just provide you some personal solace.